The psychiatric facility in central Pennsylvania housed the federal criminal justice system's most dangerous individuals found not guilty by reason of insanity. Behind reinforced concrete walls and multiple security perimeters, 73 patients received treatment while being confined under conditions exceeding maximum security prisons. Among them was a patient who had murdered 11 people across 4 states before his capture, and subsequent psychiatric evaluation deemed him legally insane at the time of his crimes. He had been confined for 8 years, his case reviewed annually by panels of psychiatrists who consistently found him too dangerous for release or transfer to less secure facilities. The transfer order came from a federal court requiring the patient to testify in the trial of an accomplice who had assisted in 2 of the murders. Defense attorneys argued that without the patient's testimony, their client could not receive a fair trial. Prosecutors opposed the transfer, citing security concerns and questioning whether testimony from someone judged insane would have any evidentiary value. The judge ruled that the defendant's constitutional rights required access to potentially exculpatory witnesses, ordering the facility to transport the patient to the courthouse in Pittsburgh for deposition. Security protocols for the transport were extensive. The patient would be restrained with handcuffs, leg irons, and a waist chain. He would wear a GPS tracking anklet and be monitored continuously by video cameras inside the transport vehicle. 3 U.S. Marshals would accompany him, rotating positions to ensure constant vigilance. The route would be varied from standard patterns, and state police would be notified to provide backup support if needed. Medical personnel from the facility would accompany the transport to manage any psychiatric episodes that might occur during the journey. The transport departed at 7 in the morning. The patient loaded into a specially configured van through the facility's secure sally port. He appeared calm, responding to commands without resistance, making eye contact with marshals in ways that suggested complete awareness of his surroundings. The facility's medical director had briefed marshals about the patient's intelligence and manipulative capabilities, warning that his compliance might be tactical rather than genuine. 8 years of treatment had not fundamentally changed his psychological profile. He remained a psychopath with no empathy, no remorse, and sophisticated understanding of how to manipulate systems and people. The route to Pittsburgh covered approximately 200 miles through rural Pennsylvania, a journey that should have taken 3.5 hours. The convoy made it 70 miles before the incident occurred. At a rest stop where the vehicle paused for a scheduled security check, the patient complained of severe chest pain and difficulty breathing. Medical personnel assessed him and detected irregular heartbeat patterns consistent with cardiac distress. Standard protocol required immediate medical evaluation at the nearest hospital, a decision that diverted the convoy from its planned route to a regional medical center in a small town 30 miles from the interstate. The hospital emergency department had been notified to expect a high-security patient requiring cardiac evaluation. Security personnel cleared a section of the facility, and marshals maintained positions around the patient as medical staff conducted examinations. An EKG showed abnormalities that concerned the attending physician, who ordered additional tests including blood work and cardiac imaging. The patient was moved to a procedure room where imaging equipment could perform detailed scans of his heart function. What happened next occurred within a span of 90 seconds. The patient, apparently having faked or induced his cardiac symptoms, suddenly became violent when only 2 marshals were in the immediate room, the third having stepped out to coordinate with hospital security. He used the chain connecting his handcuffs to strike one Marshal across the throat, crushing his windpipe and dropping him instantly. The second Marshal reached for her weapon, but the patient, moving with shocking speed despite his restraints, grabbed a metal equipment tray and struck her repeatedly in the head until she collapsed. He used keys taken from the fallen Marshals to remove his restraints, then stripped one Marshal of his uniform. Hospital security arrived within 60 seconds, but found the procedure room empty, except for two severely wounded Marshals and medical staff attempting to provide emergency care. The patient had escaped through a service corridor that connected to the hospital's maintenance areas, spaces that were not secured because they were considered internal access points rather than potential escape routes. The third Marshal immediately activated emergency protocols. State police were notified, and roadblocks were established on major routes out of the area. FBI agents from the Pittsburgh field office were dispatched to coordinate the response. U.S. Marshals from across Pennsylvania converged on the small town, establishing a command post and beginning systematic search operations. The hospital went into lockdown, with security teams checking every room, closet, and maintenance space for signs of the escaped patient, but he was already gone. Security footage showed him exiting the hospital through a loading dock used for supply deliveries, walking calmly despite wearing a Marshal's uniform that did not fit properly. He approached a delivery truck that was idling in the parking area, and footage showed him speaking briefly with the driver before apparently pulling the driver from the vehicle and driving away. The truck was found abandoned 40 minutes later on a rural road 12 miles from the hospital. The driver locked in the cargo area, shaken but physically unharmed. The manhunt expanded to cover a 60-mile radius around the hospital. State police helicopters with thermal imaging equipment swept forested areas where the patient might attempt to hide. Canine units tracked his scent from the abandoned truck through woods and across farmland, but the trail ended at a creek where he had apparently entered the water to break the scent trail. Roadblocks intercepted hundreds of vehicles, checking drivers and searching for any sign of the fugitive. But he had vanished into rural Pennsylvania's landscape. Investigators reviewed everything known about the patient's background, looking for locations he might seek refuge or contacts who might assist him. He had grown up in western Pennsylvania, his childhood marked by escalating violence that began with animal cruelty and progressed to attacks on classmates. His family had long since disowned him, moving to another state after his arrest to escape the stigma of his crimes. But he knew the region intimately, having spent years exploring its forests and rural areas before his arrest. Psychological profiles suggested he would not flee randomly, but would have a plan developed over years of confinement. Experts theorized he might seek out one of the locations where he had committed his original murders, places that held psychological significance. Surveillance was established at these sites, with undercover teams watching for any indication he might appear. Former associates and family members received protective details, as the patient had made threats against several people who had testified during his trial. The first indication of his direction came 72 hours after the escape. A farmer reported finding evidence that someone had been sleeping in his barn and had stolen food from his home while the family was away. The location was 35 miles northeast of where the truck had been abandoned, suggesting the patient was moving through rural areas and avoiding roads where law enforcement maintained heavy presence. Canine units tracked scent from the barn into densely forested state game lands, vast areas of wilderness that offered concealment but also posed survival challenges. Marshals adapted their strategy to the terrain. Rather than attempting to track the patient directly through wilderness where he had advantages, they positioned teams at likely exit points and supply sources. Small towns and isolated homes were warned to secure property and report any suspicious activity. Game wardens who knew the territory intimately were recruited to identify likely routes and hiding places. The net tightened gradually, channeling the patient toward areas where apprehension could occur with minimal risk to civilians. But the patient was not simply fleeing. 5 days after his escape, a body was discovered in a remote cabin. A hunter who had apparently encountered the patient and been killed for his supplies and vehicle. The murder bore the patient's signature methodology, demonstrating that 8 years of psychiatric treatment and confinement had not altered his fundamental willingness to kill when it served his purposes. The vehicle was found abandoned 2 days later, near the Ohio border, suggesting the patient was attempting to leave Pennsylvania and possibly flee to another region where manhunt resources were less concentrated. The Marshals task force coordinated with Ohio authorities to establish surveillance along likely routes. The patient's photograph appeared on news broadcasts and social media, generating hundreds of tips that had to be investigated and eliminated. Some sightings were credible, placing him in specific locations at specific times. Others were clearly mistaken identity or attention-seeking false reports. Each lead consumed investigative resources, but Marshals recognized that somewhere in the flood of information might be the crucial detail that led to recapture. The break came from an unexpected source. A psychiatrist who had treated the patient during his confinement contacted the task force with analysis based on years of therapeutic sessions. She described his obsession with a specific location in rural Ohio, where his family had owned a vacation property during his childhood. He had mentioned this place repeatedly during therapy, describing it as the only location where he had felt peace. The property had been sold decades earlier, but the psychiatrist believed he might attempt to reach it, drawn by psychological need to reconnect with the one positive memory from his past. Marshals investigated the location, a deteriorating cabin on 20 acres of isolated woodland. Surveillance teams positioned themselves in the surrounding forest, watching for any approach. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then, on the 4th evening, thermal imaging detected a heat signature moving through the woods toward the cabin. Tactical teams moved to intercept, using night vision to navigate in darkness, while the fugitive apparently relied on memory to find his way through terrain he had not seen in 30 years. The apprehension occurred without shots fired. The patient, exhausted from 11 days on the run and apparently believing he had reached sanctuary, entered the cabin and began searching through debris from decades of abandonment. When tactical teams breached the door, he initially attempted to flee through a rear window, but found Marshals positioned there as well. Surrounded and recognizing that escape was impossible, he surrendered, expressing disappointment rather than fear or anger. Medical evaluation after his capture revealed he had lost 23 pounds during his time as fugitive. His feet showed severe blisters and early signs of infection from walking long distances in stolen boots that did not fit properly. Psychiatric assessment found him in the same psychological state as before his escape, showing no remorse for the hunter he had killed and expressing only frustration that his plan had failed. He was transferred immediately to a more secure federal psychiatric facility in Missouri. one designed specifically for patients who had demonstrated ability to escape from standard confinement. The Marshals who had been attacked during the escape survived, but suffered permanent injuries. One required extensive surgery to repair his damaged throat and would never regain full voice function. The other sustained traumatic brain injury from repeated blows to the head, resulting in cognitive impairment that forced medical retirement from the Marshal service. The patient faced additional federal charges for assaulting federal officers, murder during flight, and escape from federal custody. Charges that would be adjudicated even though he was confined in a psychiatric facility rather than prison. The legal proceedings revealed flaws in the transport protocols that had enabled the escape. The decision to divert to a regional hospital that lacked adequate security infrastructure was identified as a critical mistake. Faking medical emergencies should have been anticipated given the patient's history of manipulation. Security should have been enhanced rather than reduced when entering an unsecured civilian facility. Reforms were implemented to prevent similar escapes, including requirements that high-risk patients be transported only to facilities with appropriate security capabilities and that minimum security postures be maintained regardless of apparent medical emergencies. The Hunter's family filed a civil lawsuit against the federal government, arguing that negligence in securing the patient had directly led to their loved one's death. The case settled for an undisclosed amount, with government attorneys acknowledging that security failures had contributed to the escape and subsequent murder. The settlement included provisions for enhanced training and security protocols designed to prevent future escapes by forensic psychiatric patients. For the small town where the escape occurred, the 11-day manhunt brought unwelcome attention and economic disruption. Tourism declined as visitors avoided an area associated with a serial killer on the loose. Property values temporarily dropped as residents questioned whether living in such a rural area made them vulnerable to similar incidents. Law enforcement presence during the manhunt reassured some residents, but alarmed others who saw it as evidence that their quiet community was no longer safe. The psychiatric facility, where the patient had been originally confined, conducted extensive internal review, examining whether warning signs of escape planning had been missed during treatment. Records showed the patient had been compliant with medication and therapy, participating in sessions without obvious indication. He was planning violence, but experts noted that psychopaths are skilled at presenting whatever behavior they believe will serve their interests, and compliance during confinement did not indicate genuine therapeutic progress or reduced danger. The new facility in Missouri implemented even more stringent security measures. The patient was confined to a single cell under 24-hour video surveillance. All movement outside the cell required multiple officers and full restraints. Therapy sessions occurred through reinforced glass, with no physical contact between patient and staff. The conditions approached solitary confinement, raising questions from mental health advocates about whether such isolation constituted appropriate treatment or was simply warehousing a dangerous individual in psychiatric terms rather than criminal justice terms. Legal scholars debated whether individuals found not guilty by reason of insanity should be held in prison-like conditions when they were theoretically receiving treatment rather than punishment. The patient's case highlighted tensions between public safety requirements and mental health treatment principles. Facilities needed to prevent escape and protect staff, but psychiatric treatment traditionally emphasized therapeutic environments rather than punitive isolation. Balancing these competing needs remained an unsolved challenge in forensic psychiatry. The accomplice whose trial had necessitated the transport, was convicted without the patient's testimony. Prosecutors successfully argued that the escape and subsequent murder demonstrated consciousness of guilt, undermining defense claims that the accomplice was an unwitting participant in the original crimes. The jury deliberated briefly before returning guilty verdicts, and the accomplice received a sentence of 40 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. For the Marshal Service, the case became a training example, studied for both its failures and ultimate success. The escape represented failure in security protocols and decision-making during medical emergencies. The recapture demonstrated effective coordination between agencies, intelligent use of psychological analysis, and patient establishment of surveillance at locations identified through behavioral profiling. The balance between these lessons shaped how future high-risk transports would be conducted. Years after the escape, the patient remains confined in the Missouri facility. He files occasional legal challenges, arguing that his confinement conditions are cruel and unusual, but courts consistently find that his demonstrated dangerousness justifies the security measures. His treatment team reports minimal progress toward any therapeutic goals, with the patient showing no genuine remorse for his crimes and expressing his primary regret as getting caught rather than harming others. The two marshals attacked during his escape received disability compensation and awards for valor in the line of duty. Both attended ceremonies honoring their service, though the physical and psychological impacts of the assault made public appearances difficult. They became advocates for enhanced security protocols in federal prisoner transport, speaking at law enforcement conferences about lessons learned from the incident. The hunter's family established a scholarship in his memory, funding education for students pursuing careers in wildlife management and conservation. They chose to honor his passion for outdoors rather than focus on the circumstances of his death, finding some measure of peace in creating something positive from tragedy. The scholarship has supported dozens of students over the years, a legacy that transcends the random violence that ended the hunter's life. The escape and manhunt cost federal and state governments an estimated $14 million in direct expenses, including overtime for law enforcement personnel, helicopter operations, and coordination efforts across multiple jurisdictions. Indirect costs, including court proceedings, facility security enhancements, and settlement with the hunter's family, pushed total expenses above $20 million. These costs did not include the immeasurable impact on the two injured marshals and the hunter's family. Psychiatric experts who have studied the case note that the patient's escape was not impulsive, but carefully planned over months or years. His compliance with treatment masked ongoing psychological processes focused on manipulation and exploitation of any opportunity. His fake cardiac emergency was rehearsed through subtle practice that went undetected by medical staff who saw him regularly. His violence during the escape was controlled and purposeful, designed to incapacitate, rather than kill the marshals because he needed time to escape before alarms were raised. The psychological profile developed from studying his escape informed how other high-risk psychiatric patients are assessed and managed. Warning signs of escape planning became better defined. Security protocols were enhanced to account for sophisticated manipulation by individuals with high intelligence and psychopathic traits. The case demonstrated that some individuals are so fundamentally dangerous that treatment goals must be secondary to containment and public safety. The small Ohio cabin where he was recaptured has been demolished. The property sold to new owners who had no connection to his family or crimes. Local residents rarely mention the manhunt, preferring to forget the period when their community was the focus of national attention for housing a serial killer. The woods where tactical teams apprehended him look like any other rural woodland, giving no indication of the violence that occurred there or the intensive manhunt that preceded the capture. For law enforcement agencies that participated in the manhunt, the successful recapture validated training and coordination protocols while highlighting areas requiring improvement. The escape should never have occurred, but once it did, the response demonstrated capability to mobilize resources quickly, coordinate across jurisdictional boundaries, and ultimately apprehend a dangerous fugitive before he could harm additional victims beyond the tragic murder of the hunter. The patient's additional charges for assault on federal officers and murder during escape will likely never be prosecuted. His psychiatric commitment already ensures he will never be released, and prosecuting additional charges would require transporting him to court, creating the same security risks that led to his original escape. Prosecutors decided that public safety was better served by enhanced confinement than by pursuing convictions that would not meaningfully change his status or sentence. In the years since his recapture, no additional escapes have occurred from federal forensic psychiatric facilities. Enhanced security measures, improved training for staff, and more sophisticated assessment of patient manipulation have created environments where escape attempts are detected before they can be executed. The patient's case served as wake-up call that motivated systemic improvements across the federal psychiatric facility system. The marshals who coordinated the manhunt reflect on the case with mixed emotions. Pride in successful recapture competes with regret about the hunter who died and the two colleagues who suffered permanent injury. They understand that law enforcement cannot prevent all violence, but they carry awareness that security failures enabled this particular tragedy. Their continued advocacy for enhanced protocols represents an attempt to ensure that lessons learned through painful experience improve safety for future operations. The patient sits in his isolated cell in Missouri, his days structured around rigid routine designed to minimize any opportunity for violence or escape. He reads extensively, writes occasionally, and participates in limited therapy sessions that show no meaningful progress. He is now 51 years old, likely to spend the remaining decades of his life in similar confinement, a danger too great to allow any reduction in security, regardless of his advancing age or any claimed progress in treatment.